Hey, good day everyone, and welcome to another series of the Daily Elastic Bytes. Today, I would like to talk about alerting. And in order to take a look at alerting, I already started up a cluster. And as usual, we need to talk a little about the different kinds of alerting and how to get up and running with rules and connectors. So let's do that. First things first, I will take a look at the settings over here. And there's our stack management part, and that one contains an own alerting and insights part. Just to be sure that you get the differentiation, there's two implementations of alerting. There's the Watcher one, which is a little older, kind of a more complex, specialized implementation, which runs on the Elasticsearch side of things. And then there's the alerting within Kibana, which is also more deeply integrated into the different solutions. And we will take a look at the latter one today. So basically, the two core parts that this consists of is rules and connectors. So connectors are points where to send something to once an alert is triggered. And rules are basically the different kind of rule sets in order to trigger something and send it through a connector to an endpoint. So from a connector perspective, we basically have a couple of different ones. There's one pre-installed one, that is the Elastic Cloud one. And that one allows you to send emails immediately to your endpoint, to your user account. So I'm logged in with this one. Could say test. Could click on run and see if that goes through, and it indeed does. If I, however, switch this to my private account and run it again, this would not run through because this email is not tied to my account. If I would like to do that, I would need to go back to Elastic Cloud, take a look at the organization and the contacts, and would be able to add the contacts down here. So once you add a contact, there will be another email that you have to approve, and then this email address would be able to receive this kind of data. So let's create another connector. And you can see here, there's a fair share of connectors. I could just index into another Elasticsearch index. There's a couple of third-party components, and there's a generic webhook. And that's something we would like to take a look on today. So I will switch to my terminal, and I have created a webhook, and that is a small web server that's written Crystal. All that this web server is doing is basically logging the request. So if we now run localhost 8080, you can see here that the request itself is logged. That's pretty much all that we're after. Because this is running on my desktop machine, we need to kind of expose it to the internet. There's a small CLI tool called Borre, and that allows us to expose it via this port. Again, running this with a curl request, you see that this request actually reached the web server. So we now have a webhook endpoint. We can just copy and paste this as the endpoint that we would like to hit and create our new test endpoint over here. We can run a post request to this URL. We don't need authentication for this one, but you should obviously add it once you go into our production realms. I can have my custom header with some value that we would like to get at. And of course, we would like to add this one as well. So this is test and run this. The test was successful. When we go and take a look over here, this is a test. So everything gets sent, including trace APM headers. So we could even measure further for certain APM traces. Okay, now we know that our endpoint is up and running. Let us take a look at a rule. So let's create a rule. And you can see here, this is where there's a huge difference to Watcher. There's a lot of different rules. There's an APM rule for certain parts within our solutions. There's a logs rule that you can configure, something for machine learning to make sure that your machine learning jobs are up and running, also for the stack monitoring itself. And all of those are much more and easier reachable within the own UI parts of each solution. So you don't have to create it via this way. It's just that the type of rules are listed here. And then there are stack rules, and this is what we would like to take a look at. We want to trigger something when we exceed a certain threshold. So let's do that. Before I do that, I would like to create an index. and an index that contains some mapping. So I do have an index that contains a timestamp field and a hits field. And we can also just index a sample documentation. This is right about now. It's UTC time, so it looks a little different than my local time. And now let's create an index threshold. My index threshold rule. We want to check this every 10 seconds just to make sure it runs fast enough while we demo this. I would like to query my test index, select the timestamp field, and would like to maybe sum things up, and would like to take the hits field over all documents for the last 5 minutes. And let's do this above 5,000. So when all the hits summed up across all the documents of that query is above 5,000, we would like this to trigger. I would like to send a webhook, and I would like to run it when the threshold is mapped to my test endpoint. Let's quickly copy a sample body I have prepared and paste that in here. So there's basically a mustache-like syntax to access certain fields. There's a long list of fields that you can actually access. I just picked 2 here to show this for this example. And we can also add another action for another webhook when this check actually recovers. So instead of met, let's say the threshold recovered. Let's also put this to our webhook connector and save this one. So now we have the rule up and running. Let's make sure that we pretty much hit this by easily adding a single document with a lot of hits. And let's take a look when this will apply. So you see here that it's still sometime off. So I can just make this a little quicker. Or I could go like up to 5 minutes in the past. That would be a valid option as well. Let's take a look here and refresh how this works. So this is marked as active. We have our threshold rule over here. We could also mute it if you wanted it, or just disable it. But for now, I think we're good enough because we want to see how it triggers. And you can see here the value that I added is now triggered. We have a message here that kind of explains us how everything is hit and our endpoint is hit. And now we would also like to see if the recovery is working. And we could just change this document back to 100. So it's below our threshold. Wait until the next run here has happened and see if this continues to run. We can also go back here, and you can see here that the threshold is recovered. So this is especially useful in any kind of alerting situation, that if you put something into a Slack channel and someone says, oh, okay, there's an alert, but out of whatever reason, the system is either healed by someone intervening, or maybe because the load stopped or whatever, that you also see, okay, this issue is resolved. We can probably go ahead and fix other issues. Okay, so the last step that I could do is I could disable this check so it's not running. I could snooze it for some time. That might be extremely useful if there is an alert that is basically just keep repeating itself, but you know it, you work on it, and you just want to make sure it goes back to its initial state after some point in time when you've stopped working on it. Yeah, that's it for today. So getting up and running with alerting, creating new rules is easy. Creating or using the existing connectors is something you should take a look at. And with the webhook connector one, you basically have all the flexibility you need to push data to arbitrary endpoints as well when an alert triggers, but also when it recovers. That's it for today. We will have the next Daily Elastic Byte on Monday. So see you there and have a good weekend. Goodbye.